Hey everybody, thanks for joining us here at Sunnyside today. It's Hydrangea class day, one of my favorites. I'm Trevor Cameron, our general manager here. Say hi to Ben. He's in the background handling the chat today.
Hello everyone.
Nicole's on hiatus here for a few weeks, so we're trying, it's an all testosterone meeting today. We'll see how it goes here. We do have a special guest in the background. We're not going to show you his picture, but Mr. Smith, the whistling gardener, is in the house today. We drug him out of retirement, so he'll be back there answering some questions too during the class. So make sure you say hi to Steve as well. But thanks for joining us. I'm hoping everybody got a copy of the Hydrangealicous. That's not really a word, but I just like the word handout. So you got all your information in there. You can go back and reference that whenever you need to. But that should be a really good kind of thing back to refer in your yard as you're looking at different kinds of hydrangeas and what to take care of. So we're going to start, again, reminder, this is recording. So it's always recorded and then posted on our YouTube channel here. After the class, we do a little editing and then we'll have it up on the website. So you can always go back, check it again. If you missed the class, a lot of folks ask, I can't make it at 10, you can go watch it anytime you like. So we'll do questions at the end, and then again, if you're missing the handout, let us know. You can access it on the website, or certainly if we need to, we can also email it to you after the class as well. I've got copies on my laptop in there. So we're going to show a few pictures here towards the end, but I thought maybe first I'd just talk a little bit about some basics of hydrangeas. When you're choosing your hydrangeas, you're going to learn today, we've got some for shade, some for sun. The majority of the hydrangeas will all take that part sun, part shade location, but when we have the extreme one way or another, picking the right plant is always the way to have a good garden with the right plant in the right place. So we'll show you some of that as we go through. Pruning is inevitably going to come up here at some point during the class. It always does. If we go through kind of the year, what I would look to do on my hydrangeas is, fast forward to the fall when we get into after frost, our flowers have turned brown, hydrangeas are deciduous, we've turned color, we've dropped our leaves. The one thing I would always make sure to do in the fall is just simply deadhead. I don't want those heavy dried blossoms, snow, wind, don't want to take a chance of breaking branches. So a lot of times I'll simply just go along and deadhead them as we go into winter, and then I'm going to walk away. You can use the leaves for mulch. You certainly can scrape them up. If you're OCD like me, you probably put them in the yard waste, but we would deadhead it, maybe clean up a little bit of the mulch, and we're good to go for winter. Fast forward to March. In early March is when we want to prune our plants to start the season off. So we get towards that end of winter, no hard frost coming. We would pay attention to the variety, and this is what we're going to learn about today in the class is, does my hydrangea bloom on new wood, which means I grew out for the season, I set a flower bud and I get immediate reward, or is it an old wood bloomer, which means if I prune down too hard, I have no flowering the next year. So be real careful to know which plant we're talking about. You'll see in the handout and me talking, we'll talk about some old wood and some new wood, but that time in March is when we would want to tidy our plant up, get in there, remove dead wood, open up the crown, cut it back a little bit, perhaps on an old wood bloomer. If it's a new wood bloomer, that allows us the flexibility to prune it back very hard and still have the reward of the flower that immediately that next summer, okay? So hydrangea, to me is one of the best shrubs for summer. We kind of do this class a little bit in May. This is prime time hydrangeas. If you got them in your yard, they are in full bloom here, and we have flowering all the way through into the fall when we have frost. So whether, again, sun, shade, different varieties, this is the shrub that's going to give us a very long season of flowering here in the Pacific Northwest. So great plant for Western Washington. If we talk feeding real quick, again, at minimum, I would always feed my hydrangeas in early March when I'm out there doing my pruning, and at least one more time again in May, June. So typically I'm an organic guy. That's what we like to recommend here to our customers. Get some great organic fertilizer from EB Stone. I'll reach over here and grab a couple. Let's say, rhododendron food we can't lose with anything. Slightly acidic. If you have a blue to purple hydrangea, this will keep it that way or help a little bit. But this is a granular food I could put down in March and then do it again in the early summer. If I'm trying to keep mine pink or red, which is something we'll talk about here in a minute. This is not going to change my pH, but rose and flower food would be neutral. So if I have one that I've worked on to keep pink or red, rose and flower food works very well. And for all the PG type hydrangeas we'll talk about today. So rose and flower food is an excellent way to go. If you want a little bonus, I use a lot of ultra bloom in my yard on rhododendrons, azaleas, just about anything that I want to create more bud and flower. This has no nitrogen. It's all about flower. So if I'm trying to increase the bud count, maximize my flower, it's not a bad idea to go out there at least once in early summer and put a nice dose of ultra bloom down on a lot of my shrubs that will allow them to bud for the next season if they're old wood bloomers, or with the hydrangeas that would keep my flowering and bud production going as we go through the summer and the fall. Lastly, on food, if you really want to give them a kick, a lot of times here at the nursery, we use a product called Seagrow. You know, we'll liquid fertilize most of our plants on a weekly basis. We've got it on special right now, so it's a great price, 20% off. But Seagrow is kind of one of those hybrid fertilizers. So I would have the benefit of synthetic with some organic goodies in there. And if I want to foliar feed my hydrangea or soak the root system on occasion, I certainly won't talk you out of doing that. That again is just going to give me a little more growth, a little happier plant, and a well-fed specimen is always going to give you the reward of the flowers all summer. Okay, so just a little bit on feeding. Watering is going to be the key. We're inevitably going to get into some questions about scorched plants, I have a feeling today. We got 112 degrees here, which is never probably going to happen again in our lifetimes. But a lot of plants just flat out got scorched, whether we watered or didn't water. You know, certainly some water helped, but hydrangeas are a plant that loves irrigation. And because I got maybe scorched or my flowers got sunburned, it's not the end of the world. It's not going to damage the plant long term. We certainly could do a little bit of pruning, feed it, let it recover, or live with a little bit of frosted foliage this summer. It'll still keep growing and on blooming. It's not going to affect the plant the rest of the summer, but just something to kind of watch for, because the scorch happened to quite a bit of plants here in Western Washington with the heat. Okay, so I'm going to start. Give me a second here. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go through and show you all kinds of hydrangeas. Give me 1 second. It comes up. There we go. PowerPoint's a little slow. There we go. Okay. So you can see there's me in case you forgot who I was already. We're doing the hydrangeas today. If we start with big leaf hydrangeas, so when I say that, that's your typical one. I think most folks think of hydrangea. Big round flower, purple, blue, pink, red. The color we'll talk about is dictated by pH, but that's our shade hydrangea, one that we could have morning sun, maybe a little bit afternoon shade is preferable, especially with the heat we've had this summer. But these are all varieties of a plant, Hydrangea Macrophylla, big leaf hydrangea, mophead hydrangea, a bunch of different names for it. Like I said, best in morning sun, part shade, filtered shade. You know, I can have a little bit of afternoon sun, that's fine. I would recommend you not plant big leaf hydrangeas where we get all day sun in the afternoon. You're really going to have to water and inevitably going to have some sunburn on the foliage in the summer, even if it doesn't reach 112 degrees. You know, like I keep mentioning, this is flower power all summer long. You know, if I'm looking from June all the way till frost for color on a really nice shrub, hydrangea is the way to go. This would be the #1 thing for shade when we have a very long season of bloom. The flower color is totally dictated by soil pH. So if you're a gardener here in Western Washington where we're at, we have acidic soils. So my hydrangea is always going to turn some shade of blue, sky blue, cobalt blue, purple blue, depending on how acidic your soil is. I can intensify the color if I want to make that one little spot in my yard more acidic. I could play with the pH and turn it back towards pink or red if I want to make it alkaline. So that's why using an amendment I'll show you here towards the end, but we can always play with the soil acidity to dictate our flower color. As you can see there, to remind you, acidic is always blue, purple, alkaline always pink or red. There are some white ones available. I'll show you towards the end. So if I want white without the blue, the pink, the red, the rest of it, just a pure white flower, maybe just a hint of light blue in it or light pink. There are some good varieties for that as well. So now I mentioned again, big round flowers for moped hydrangeas. We also have lace caps in that same group. So if you want the flat flower with the open florets on the outside and sterile in the middle, that's a very attractive flower. It's a little bit different. I'll be showing you those here. You'll see some of the pictures as well. You know, again, pay attention to which varieties bloom on only old wood and those that bloom on old and new wood, because that totally dictates your pruning. If I have a big area in my garden, you know, have at an old-fashioned one, Nico Blue, Glowing Embers, a zillion great old-fashioned hydrangeas that will make a magnificent specimen, you know, but I'm going to need a good 6 foot tall, 6 or sometimes wider area that I can let that mature and bloom to its maximum potential. If I don't have that much space, I got a little 4x4 area, I'd love to have some color in the summer. That is where we want to take advantage of the new varieties. So all the endless summers, I'll show you a bunch in the pictures here of ones that bloom on new wood. Excuse me. As I mentioned before, this will dictate your pruning. I can cut new wood bloomers down substantially coming out of winter and not affect the flowering. I can't do that with old wood bloomers, or I will sacrifice bloom for that season. Not going to hurt my plant. It'll grow, get nice leaves, but you'll be out there in July going, where are my flowers? And that's just because we cut an old one down a little bit too hard, okay? That'll just remind you there on the fertilizing, you know, at least once in spring and again in early summer. And you've got to keep hydrangeas watered. Not to make you learn Latin today, but that is Latin. Hydra is our Latin old school word for water. And they call it hydrangea because they love to soak up some water. This is not a drought tolerant plant whatsoever. Even sun, shade, doesn't matter which. A good mulch, good feeding, and regular watering in the summer months will really keep them thriving and get you the flowers you want. So if we look at some varieties that we have to choose from here, oops, excuse me. We look at some varieties we have to choose from. Now, here's a couple old school ones. So these are old wood bloomers that I perhaps cannot cut back quite as good. Nico Blue is the all-time favorite around here, an old Japanese variety. A lot of folks have it in their yard. A very popular one still to this day, but that's a massive specimen hydrangea, you know, probably 6 foot tall, if not taller, and one that I can really use as a nice background specimen shrub in my shade garden or morning sun garden for summer bloom. Glowing Embers is one, we show it in the pink or the red color because typically that's one that would get close to red if we played with our soil and made it alkaline. That's when we can get really red, or vice versa, we would go towards the purple side and not so much blue. Red wings, there's a perfect example of a lace cap that I mentioned. If you like those kind of flat round flowers with the florets on the outside, a very cool flower for texture and some color. Red wings, you know, again, if we have alkaline soil, we'd stay nice and red. We could play with that just as easily and make it blue, purple, any shade on the other side as well. Miss Sayori has been out for a few years. And that's a new one that does bloom on new and old wood. So we can keep this one much more compact. The biggest thing I would point out with that, and some of the other ones we'll look at, is foliage color. So if you look at that picture, I've got a two-tone flower that's going to have the red with the white, or the reddish pink with the white, but I'm also going to have some purple burgundy color in my foliage. So again, when it's not blooming, a lot of green usually here in Western Washington. If I could add that type of hydrangea into my shade garden, I'm adding a little bit of foliage interest as well. And that one will take maybe a little bit more sun than some of the varieties also. Some other new ones here, well, not new, but pistachio is one. I got one behind me. I'll show you here towards the end. But that's going to give me that tie-dye look. You know, if you want a really cool, unique, kind of funky flower, pistachio is the one to do it. You can see lime and silver and pinks and reds. Again, the opposite in acidic soil. I'm going to see the blues, the lavenders, a little touch of purple, but I'm always going to have that lime green and kind of that multicolored in my flowers on pistachio. Spike is a new one for us this year. another great kind of new wood, old wood bloomer with a nice sized flower. If you can look at the bloom on that, maybe go back and watch it. You can blow up that picture a little bit on your computer. That one's going to have a really cool kind of ruffled edge to the petals. So a little bit different texture on the flowers, but the same color progression we've been talking about. Here's some really fun ones that our friends in the Netherlands, you know, if you're not Dutch, you ain't much, is our saying. So they've introduced quite a number of great hydrangeas out of Europe, in particular the Netherlands, over the years. The Everlasting series was frankly bred for the floral culture. So they were looking for something with a very thick stem, a nice tight growth habit that bloomed a lot of flowers in the summer, so they could use them for cut blooms, you know, on arrangements in floral shops. I think some of these Everlasting series are pretty cool. You can see, again, a little different color. The Revolution here is going to give me the blue with the white, little lime green. If I went out and looked at that flower, you know, once a month here, as the color progresses, it's going to look different as the summer goes on. You get some really interesting little combinations in those. Everlasting Bride, if you're into the white, that would be our pure white version with a huge bloom on a nice short plant that would get a little bit of lime green in there as well. And then Everlasting Crimson, if I want to go the other direction, play with my soil pH and get a little more alkaline, I could have that crimson red with the lime green and again, kind of the multiple colors. Now, if we get into kind of some of the new generation, I should say before with the Everlasting. So that one is an old wood bloomer. I want to make sure that's clear, but that's a little bit different because the flowers last so long and it is so short. Excuse me. So I don't think you're going to have an issue growing any of those Revolutions and keeping them under 4 foot in the garden, even with a little bit of pruning, and still get all the flowering you want. Okay. Excuse me. It's getting hot in the greenhouse here. So Endless Summer is our collection out of Bailey Nurseries back in Minnesota. This was kind of the original new wood blooming hydrangea. So this is one that we've got some options now for varieties. Excuse me, I'm gonna get a little water. But certainly all these will follow the same principles. These are plants that will stay in the 3 to 4 foot tall range, usually 3 to 4 foot wide. And you can see by the amount of flowering, very heavy flower producers, very nice compact plants. So Twist and Shout is our lace cap variety. So if I like that flat lace cap flower and I want something that repeat flowers, you want to look for Twist and Shout. That's as good as it gets out of the Endless Summer collection. Bloomstruck is one of the newer ones here a few years ago. And that is one, to me, if I wanted to stay more on the lavender to purple side and not as much blue, Bloomstruck may be a good one to choose because that one would have that lavender to purple color and not go so much blue. Oh, thank you. If we look at the next two in that series, Summer Crush is the latest one and probably one of my personal favorites. Again, I can have raspberry red if I want to go alkaline towards purple, or blue, depending on the pH. But that one, we tend to get a real crisp kind of raspberry red to a pretty vibrant purple at the other extreme. Blushing Bride is the white one. So if, again, I want to go white on a new and old wood blooming hydrangea, I don't think you're going to beat Blushing Bride. That one's been out for a while. And some folks, again, especially in the shade garden, a really nice bright white is going to pop when we've got a little more darkness back there. So Blushing Bride may be one to look at as well. Now, Monrovia is one of our biggest growing partners here at Sunnyside. I think it's one of the top quality nurseries in the country, the biggest grower. We get a lot of plants from Monrovia, and they do an excellent job introducing new varieties and partnering with arboretums and private breeders to bring us cool new plants. The Seaside Serenade collection is there, similar to the Endless Summer. It's their version of nice, tight, dwarf, compact hydrangeas that will repeat flower on old and new wood. So we've got a number of options for those as well. Cape Lookout, there's our white version. You can see pure white. And as that flower ages, I'll get just a little hint again of that periwinkle blue in it, or the light pink typically, with some lime green and white. That's a really attractive flower. Certainly one of the more popular ones around here. Cape Hatteras, you know, again, nice large size mop head that I can play with the color on that one, again, from pinky red more towards that blue purple. Cape May would be their version of the lace cap. So if you want, again, that flat flower on a lace cap, Cape May would be another great option for you that, again, I can play with the color depending on my taste, pink all the way towards blue. Fire Island is probably the one unique one, and I want to make sure this is clear. Hey, I apologize, we're just about out of these right now. We'll have a fresh batch in the fall. But this is a little bit like Miss Sayori we saw earlier. I'm going to have some purple in the leaves, and this one does not change color. So if I want reddish pink, ruffled flower, white center, nice big mop pad, and a little touch of purple, Fire Island is extremely popular around here, and that's one that we would not change towards blue or purple. I want to make sure that one's kind of a little bit unique. The Hamptons, honestly, is one I have in my yard. I picked it up a few years ago, and this one is a little like Fire Island when I've got that two-tone color in it, but this one I get my purple on. So mine is spectacular right now. Got about 50 flowers out on it, big, huge heads, and every one looks like I took a violet purple paintbrush with a white center on all those flowers as we go through. So Hamptons is one, a little touch of red in the spring, especially, almost looks purple. Summertime, a little more green, little tip of foliage color, and then I get the outstanding flower. And I can play with the color on that one if I like to. Martha's Vineyards, another great dwarf one from them for the repeat blooming. We've still got some of those in there. Newport is probably the smallest one, and I'll be honest, probably out of all the hydrangeas that we talk about today here of any of these series, that might be the smallest one that I see for home gardeners. If I really want to stay just about down to that 3-foot range, new and old wood bloom, that one I can get my pink red all the way to blue purple. That's probably the most compact of any of these. That one or Summer Crush from Bailey's would be awful close. Those are both great varieties. Outer Banks is another one with the lace cap flower. That one's in the Serrata family. So we'll talk about mountain hydrangeas here in a second, but that one's got a little bit different parentage in it, a little bit hardier, a little bit more sun tolerant, a little different fall color. Let's Dance is the other series that we see from proven winners, the Color Toy Shrubs. You'll see a number of different varieties. They keep introducing new ones every season. Excuse me. Let's Dance Rave, Let's Dance Big Band, Let's Dance Rhythmic Blues. There's a whole bunch of them out there, and these are all, again, varieties from proven winners that are shrub department that bloom on new and old wood. So I've got that flexibility with pruning again. You'll see Diva. That's the big lace cap variety with a huge wide flower on it. And then Rhythmic Blues, nice and tidy as well. Now, if we look at the mountain hydrangeas, I just mentioned a minute ago that Cape May, Hydrangea Serrata is a little bit different species, just like big leaf hydrangea, not much difference, but that's kind of a subspecies where these are grown a little bit higher elevation, a little bit hardier. Maybe you're up in the mountains, east of us a little bit. Maybe the hydrangeas, they'll get a little chilly in the snow. They die back a bit. This one would be a little bit hardier as far as temperature. They also get more of the reds to purples, the brighter fall color versus just yellow on typical shade hydrangea. So old-fashioned one like Bluebird. If you've seen an old Bluebird in the garden, there's not much prettier hydrangea than a huge old massive Bluebird with all of its layered lace cap flowers, a real bright silvery blue. That one only blooms on new wood, so we have to have some room. That's a big, wide specimen for the shade. Tough Stuff Red would be an example of more of a new school one, where again, I've got that flexibility of pruning on old and new wood, and I can play with the color a little bit as well. Now, another species, so that's Hydrangea Macrophylla, or the big leaf. Now we're going to do some smooth hydrangeas. These are some big growers, so these are massive flowers, and I'm not kidding you, I'm a pretty big guy. I would see some flowers about as big as my big old head when I'm in the summertime. Maybe you recognize old Annabelle. There's a lot of old school varieties of smooth hydrangea, but these are very hardy. They take a lot of sun. You'll find these a lot in the Midwest, clipped as hedges, use them as specimen. I mean, it's a really easy hydrangea to grow, but we typically get in a lot of the good dwarf ones. So we've got a number of these around. Limetta, Wee White, you can tell by the name, is just going to have that massive white flower, but on a nice dwarf compact plant. You'll see some Incredibles, probably the biggest flower of them all. It's a great picture of kind of a nice border. I can have that, and again, more part shade, part sun. Won't have to worry about as much shade like the previous ones we talked about. And if I want to get some pink, you know, I can get Invincible Ruby. There's Mini Mauvette. There's a bunch of good varieties that will give me a little pink as well. This is not like the ones we just talked about. We talked about big leaf that I can play with the color by the pH. The rest of the hydrangeas we're talking about today, the color you see is the color you get. So if I want white, I'm buying white. I want pink, I want pink. Those are our two options for hydrangea arborescens. If we look at oak leaf hydrangeas, you know, to me, these are pretty cool. I'm kind of always into the plants for all seasons. You know, give me something besides spring or summer. You know, this is a hydrangea, I think, that looks good all year. You can see nice summer flowering, a little bit more open panicle flower. It's got interesting cut leaves, looks like an oak a little bit. These get awesome fall color. I would have every shade in the rainbow, reds and oranges and purples and yellows as those turn in the fall. And then I've also got some really cool peely exfoliating bark. So I could look at that oak leaf hydrangea, spring, summer, fall, winter, and to me, it looks interesting in all the seasons. This is one we could have in sun, part shade. I wouldn't put it in total shade, but as long as we had a half day of sun or full sun and some water, oak leaf hydrangea is very, very easy to grow. You'll see a couple varieties we showed there. Ruby Slippers is one if I wanted a little more pink in the flower, a little bit quicker. Jetstream's one of my favorites out of Bailey Nurseries, their first editions program. That's one that would always open white. All these always open white. It's just how quickly do they turn pink and what shade of pink do they turn to. So Ruby Slippers, you can tell a little bit quicker, maybe a little more towards red. Jetstream's one that I would have white a little bit longer in the summer and then start to get a little bit of light pink in there, not quite so dark. Now, PG hydrangeas is another big one we'll whip through here, but this is the big panicle hydrangeas. I'll show you a couple behind me here in a minute. You can see that one over my shoulder, actually. But if I want a big, huge cone flower, I mean, some of these get massive. This is a hydrangea for sun, not shade. I think a lot of people think shade hydrangea. This is one we could have cooking out in all day sun and they'd be as happy as can be as long as we're irrigating them. So this is one for sun, all summer bloom again, summer through fall. These are always gonna open white or lime color and then light pink, dark pink towards red in the fall. There's no color change again, but depending on the variety you choose, how quick do I want pink or do I want to get towards red? But they're always going to be those colors, no other color mixed in. I think one of the coolest things with PGs is they're all new wood bloomers, so they are no-brainers for pruning. I could do whatever I want in late winter to my PG hydrangea. I cut mine back pretty hard every spring, and then I have a smaller compact plant that still has all the flowers I could ever want. New wood bloom on all of them. That makes it real easy. And you can see some smaller ones. You know, when we talk about dwarfs on PG hydrangeas, you're probably in the 4 to 5 foot tall range. If I wanted a big old specimen for the background, the taller ones will get 6 or 8 feet easy. So pruning will dictate the height a little bit each season, but you can potentially have anything in those range. I'll show you at the end, but I think one of the nicest things for people in home gardens is PG hydrangea trained as a tree. Everybody wants a small blooming tree. You know, they come in the nursery day after day. I'm looking for a tree. Well, how big do we need to get? You know, maybe 8 or 10 feet, maybe 12 at the most. You know, really that's a large shrub size. Or we look at something like the hydrangea trees. We got some beautiful ones around right now. I've got one trunk, I've got the PG grafted on top, and they will bloom all summer into fall. It's a great summer flowering small tree again that you might be able to utilize in your garden if you want that look. So here's a few. Little Lime and Limelight are honestly identical plants. The flower is the same. Obviously, Little Lime, that's the one I have in my front yard. That's a dwarf, so I'd be much smaller. Limelight's going to get taller. It's the same lime green, then white, then light pink as we get into mid-late summer. So same color progression, same bloom. Little Lime, just a little bit smaller plant. That's one of the best. There's a lot of good PG hydrangeas, but that's one of the best ones that Proven Winners has put out, those two pairs. And I'll give you a preview for 2022. Now there's a Limelight Prime, and I'm kind of curious what's different about that. We're going to try that out for 2022. A couple more from Proven Winners. Pinky Winky has got a great name. A lot of folks like, but you can see that's perfect midsummer picture where I've got pink getting towards white on the tip, and that color will just keep going through until I have a pink panicle flower. So Pinky Winky is a taller grower, but again, new wood bloomer I can prune. If I want a dwarf, we've got some beautiful Bobos in right now. They just came in this week for the class. But if I want white, maybe a little bit longer in the summer, turning to pink eventually, but a nice like 3 foot tall, maybe 4 foot wide, compact one, I think Bobo is one of the best flowering ones. You can see by that picture, really heavy flowering, even on a small plant. I got one behind me here that's about 18 inches tall, and it's got about 40 flowers out on it. So that's an easy one to get bloom. A couple out of Bailey Nurseries, the first editions program, Berry White. Try to say that with a low voice, you know, Berry White. But Berry White is one Bailey put out here a couple years ago. Again, you can see that color progression. I would have a little bit more ruby pink mixed with the white on a massive flower. We've got plenty of those around. Vanilla Strawberry, big plant, and a big flower on that. That might be one of the bigger flowers of any of them here if you're looking for size. Vanilla Strawberry is a great one out of first editions and Bailey's as well. Strawberry Sunday would be the dwarf one from Bailey's. That's a really popular one here. Folks that like pink in the summer, much more compact and easier to grow. And then Little Hottie, we will have here in another week or two. It's finally going to get introduced here for 2021. I think our batch is due mid-August, so we'll still have all flowering through fall. But Little Hottie is the latest dwarf one out of the first editions program at Bailey's. We'll have a nice crop of those here in just a couple more weeks. Diamond Rouge, I put 2 pictures on here on that one because I think it's a great variety. And if I want to get more towards red in the fall, late summer, I want to look for Diamond Rouge. That's a very manageable size one from Bailey's first editions again. But that's perfect picture. If you look left and right there, you know, let's say the left side there is going to be June, early July. The right one there is going to be late July into August. So I'm going to see that white, light pink to ruby red a little bit quicker on something like Diamond Rouge. There's the trees. You know, I got a couple behind me. We might not see in the camera, those are so tall. But look at that in the yard. I mean, that's a great little small tree that everything blooms in spring. We got all kinds of options. That's something I can have as, again, looks like a little tiny tree in a large container or in my landscape that I will have all summer flowering with on the hydrangea trees. Now, a couple other hydrangeas real quick. Climbing hydrangeas. So we do have a number of different options for climbing types if we want something kind of viney, clingy, twiny, that's going to give me some verticality in the garden. You can see I took that chose that picture of the petiolaris on purpose because that is literally on a brick wall. And these are vines, the climbing hydrangeas, that literally will root right into anything you put it on. So yes, I'm probably not going to put it on the siding of my house, but a brick wall, a fence, a structure, pergola, arbor, we can go on and on. It'll grow and vine itself, but it's actually going to root right into a surface like that to help itself keep upright and attached for a long term. So American hydrangeas, what I would call this, the petiolaris, the green one, big white lace cap flower. They just finished blooming here, coming out of spring. Usually that's kind of a May, June thing, but I've got nice green leaves all season, nice yellow fall color. and some real pretty bark again. That's one I know I have the variegated one in my yard at Everett right here, but when that loses all its leaves after fall color, I've got a really interesting, attractive vine to look at with peely bark, kind of cinnamon color, and some cool structure, I think, even when it is dormant. So green, or we can choose a variegated one like Miranda. Some folks call that Firefly as well, but it's the same thing. I wanted the brighter yellow edge with that green center, same flower, same growth habit, all the rest. The evergreen hydrangeas are hard to come by. You know, Steve's got one in his garden here he planted years ago, and a lot of folks ask about it. It's climbing up an old Kwanzan cherry tree, and same idea. I'm rooting right into the trunk, the wood, and it makes a really nice vine if you wanted something evergreen. They're a little less hardy. I'd be real careful with these if I lived way up in the hills here. Typically down here in town or near the water, we don't have any winter issue, but this is one you probably got down into the low teens or so. You're going to have a little bit of damage in the colder winters. Samanii is the one we have here climbing in the tree. It's got a little more roundy leaf, same white lace cap flower when it blooms. It looks a lot like the deciduous climbing ones. Integrifolia is one will have a little bit more of an oblong leaf with a little serration around it. So same growth habit, evergreen, similar flower, just a couple of different foliage styles. Now, the Japanese or Chinese climbing hydrangeas kind of sounds like we're going out to get checked into the mental hospital, but schizophragma is a fun word to say. Those are plants that come from the east that are in the hydrangea family. They're not in the hydrangea genus, but they're closely related to them. And we can use as climbers in the shade in particular. Moonlight's got beautiful variegated foliage, same kind of style lace cap flower I can use to climb. It'll cling to wood. We've got some old schizo or schizophragma in our shade gardens here around the nursery. If you want to come take a look at them, they look pretty cool on the fence. But that's another couple options for something climbing. And then finally, if we look at Hydrangea Aspara, you know, this is a bush hydrangea that's native over again in the Far East. Big, huge, velvety leaves. If we had the class here in person, I'd be passing around a leaf and everyone would be touching it going, ooh, it kind of feels like velvet. It's a very attractive plant if you've got shade. This is one we don't want to have much sun on at all. Steve's got a beautiful specimen of the old Velosa in the gardens here. You can come take a look at it. It's up 10 or 12 feet growing through an arbor, a very tall shrub, but a really nice flower. But I think it's a great foliage plant that does bloom. Plum Passion, we have been lacking this year. We will have some in here in the fall, I've been promised. But this would be the purple version of that Velosa. Now, I myself could really care less if that ever flowers. If you've seen a Plum Passion just growing as a shrub like that picture, that's down in the Monrovia display gardens, that's got really attractive foliage. And yes, it does get a little flower in the summertime, but that's a plant I'd be happy to purchase and have in my yard just for the foliage alone. That's a magnificent plant that Dan Hinckley, a local plant hunter, introduced through Monrovia here a number of years ago. Okay, so that's the end. I'll stop here in a second, but you can see our website on there and also our email. I'm sure you've been emailing questions or working the chat with Ben, but that's an easy way to get a hold of us here if you need to email or check out some more information on our website. We've got a great hydrangea page that you can see pictures of most all these and great information, a printable list of the varieties that we typically stock during the season as well. Okay, so I'm going to say a couple things here. We've shown you some fertilizers, but a number of times I've been mentioning about soil pH, you know. Excuse me, are you a pink, a red, a blue, a lavender, a purple? You know, what's your color preference? You know, I'm not a huge pink guy, if I'll be honest. I like my blues and my purples, but it's up to you. You know, it's your plant, it's your color. I'm going to talk specifically about our neck of the woods in Western Washington. Again, I'd be shocked if you had an area that was alkaline. Very, very few end up planting a hydrangea plant and having it turn pink or red. We really always turn some shade of blue to purple because we're acidic. Now, I'm going to show you two things. This one's real easy. They call this hydrangea bluing agent. This is aluminum sulfate. It's not a fertilizer. It's not going to make your plant bloom. I want to make that clear. But if I take this out, open it up, you read the instructions on there, depending how big your plant is. If I go out in the spring, excuse me, and maybe one more time early summer, and I sprinkle some aluminum sulfate just around the drip line of my hydrangea, I'm going to change the pH of that one area in my yard, and I can turn it from sky blue to cobalt blue, from cobalt blue to purple. I can play with the color that way. On the opposite end, and this is going to sound funny because I'll show you the label, stump remover. It's like, what is he trying to sell me? I'm going to end up removing my hydrangea stump. What are we talking about here? If I look at the back, what's on there right there? You can see that little pretty pink picture. This is what makes my soil alkaline. Yes, I have to be careful with it. You can use it to kill your stump too. But if I want to change my flower to pink or red, I have to make that pocket alkaline. So same idea. I walk out, I can play with the color. I can change it year to year. I can turn it red, pink, or any shade on the other side, okay? So stump remover is a really easy one to turn them alkaline or go the other direction. Now, if you want to play around as a gardener, more power to you. I've done it with mine. You know, you may make a little note on the calendar. I put 4 tablespoons down that summer. What shade did I get? Ooh, that's perfect. I'm going to do the same exact thing again next time. Oh, I got a blue, but I wanted mine a little darker. Well, sweet. Let's try 5 tablespoons next year and water it in real well and see if we can adjust that color a little bit, okay? So that's a quick little thing on how to change your pH. Now, if I show you a couple plants, just an example here, I'm going to hop up. Let's see if I can lean. So like this is a 1 gallon. These are spectacular. This is Summer Crush from Bailey's, okay? So what color is that blooming? It's blooming pink or raspberry red. You can see the color coming out. Now, why is that? If I put that in my yard here, it's going to turn blue or purple naturally because we're acidic. Because I'm a grower, I'm using a potting soil or a neutral planting mix so I can have them pink. So when you come down and shop, don't look at the flower color necessarily in the pot. You've got to remember that I can change that to whatever I want. If I put this Summer Crush in my yard today, go home and plant it, water it in, put some food on it, and I'm ready to go, you're going to see those flowers immediately start to change towards blue, towards the purple end, depending on, again, how acidic your soil is. So if we look at something like Bloomstruck, this is another one from Bailey's. You can see kind of that lavender blue color, another really pretty plant. You know, that's another one that I know Bailey's in particular adds a little bit of aluminum sulfate, the same exact thing that I showed you in the can. That's one they'll work into that potting mix. So when those get delivered to our garden center to sell to you gardeners, it's going to show that lavender to blue to purple color as a little bit different, okay? Now I'll just show you a couple more here. I'm going to jump up for 1 second. Now, if I lean this over because it's too tall, this is what I'm talking about for a tree, okay? So this is limelight. And if you look at the plant, see if I can get it in front of the camera without decapitating it. See, look, I'm in a big pot. I've got a big long central trunk. I've got my shrub up top, and I have got a beautiful tree that's going to bloom the entire summer. You know, that's the thing. We sell, you know, limelights, vanilla strawberry. We've got a few different varieties that we buy in like that, trained up as trees, because I think that's a great summer blooming tree for a lot of the gardeners that want something that blooms a very long time. I'll show you if you set it behind me here. So that big bush you want in full flower, you know, there's our PG type. We talked about PG or paniculate hydrangeas. That's a diamond rouge. So yes, it's white, but if you look real close up in the middle there, I'm going to just start to see the first little bit of pink come in, and that'll get more pink and eventually red as we get towards the fall. That's one that if I want to go towards pink red, go for diamond rouge. That's one that we never would again turn blue, but white, light pink, and then progressing to red. Let me show you a couple more here. So these are spectacular too. Look at the size of those. So this is Blushing Bride. You can see, look for those blue pots That's the Endless Summer logo pot. But if I look at that, there's a Blushing Bride. What do I have? A nice pure white flower for shade that won't turn color. I'll get just a tiny little hint of that blue in there when it's gone towards the tail end of flower. But if I want the bright white for shade, that's a great way to go. I wanted to show you this, because this is what I'm talking about with that pistachio. You can see all the really cool colors in there. Again, a very nice compact plant that blooms on new wood, but I've got a lot of flowers coming out on that. And again, our grower is going to be alkaline. If I had this in acidic soil, I'd have the silvers, the light blues, the lavenders mixed with that lime green, but still have that really cool kind of tie-dye flower. And then lastly, this is Cape Lookout. So this is one of our Seaside Serenade series from Monrovia, and hopefully this isn't washed out. But now these flowers have been open for about 6 weeks, and this is what I mean. This is pure white for weeks. And then now as it's aging, I can see just a little hint of pink with that lime green. In our soil, a little hint of blue with the lime green. But again, these are repeat blooming. So these are out, all this new growth that's still growing. This comes up, another flower, another flower, another flower, and these continue to set bud and bloom all the way as we go into fall, okay? And then lastly, just to show you the amount, this is Bobo. So look at that little plant. That might be 18 inches tall, and I'll let you count how many flowers on that. If I want a great dwarf PG, I think you'll be happy with Bobo. We've got a bunch of those just came in, and it is a really nice crop. If you want a little smaller one, again, Bobo just in that 3 foot tall, maybe 4 foot wide range, okay? So we're gonna do just talk with all the classes like we usually have at Sunnyside here. We've got a great discount for the class students. So come down here, starts today, goes all the way through next Friday. Come down, tell her you were at our hydrangea class, and you've got 20% off all the hydrangeas on the property. We've got a great selection right now. I'm hoping you'll come down and do some shopping. We got a nice kind of half overcast day today. It's a good day to get out and garden. It's not too hot, but we do have a great selection, and to take advantage of that 20% off, okay? So before we do some questions, I'll turn it over to Ben here, and we'll do the chat. Just remember, tomorrow I'll be here. It's Sunday at 11. We're doing shade gardening tomorrow. So I'll be showing you a bunch of really cool stuff for shade gardening. Obviously, hydrangeas will be one of the shrub choices, but we'll show you some other stuff besides hydrangeas. We'll do kind of Pacific Northwest shade, a lot of foliage, a lot of color. Certainly jump on for that if you can. And then we'll have classes going here and again in 2 weeks. You'll check our website, and tomorrow I'll announce a couple classes here for that last weekend in July. So make sure, if you can, hop on down here and see us. I'm here all weekend. We've got some great staff around. They're happy to answer some questions, help you pick out the right hydrangea for you and your own taste in your own garden, okay? So Ben's gonna unmute himself here, and we'll see if we can do some questions if we have any. I bet you the whistling gardener, Mr. Smith, probably got most of them during the class.
Thanks, Trev. Yeah, the old whistler did get a lot of them here. I got one here for you, though. What are the best white hydrangeas for full sun, more than 6 hours?
Yeah, full sun. If I'm going to go white, we're going to go PG again. So if you're okay, again, always opening white, maybe a little bit pink towards the end of the middle to end of summer, do PG. If you want white with no other color and no other color at all, and you got full sun, go back to the middle section in my handout, or watch the show again and get some of those arborescens, the smooth hydrangeas, Incredible, Wee White. There's Limetta. There's a number of those that would never turn pink or blue. They're always going to be huge and white.
All right, thanks, Trev. Another one here for you. Looking for some blue options in full shade.
Full shade. Again, any of the big leaf hydrangeas, you know, as long as it's like deep, dark, zero sunlight, they're always going to grow. They may not bloom as much if you're talking about 0 hours. You could always thin maybe a little bit of the tree canopy above if that's the issue to get you a little light in. But all those big leaf hydrangeas are the way to go if I've got shade. I can do Endless Summer, any of that, any of the Seaside Serenade. The majority, you know, for us here at Sunnyside, I would say 95% of what we stock is these new style hydrangeas that will grow in shade and again, much easier to prune.
All right. And a couple people asking for suggestions or maybe your personal favorite for a full sun hydrangea.
Full sun. You know, there's a number. I like PGs, you know, again, this isn't your taste, it's mine. I'm not a huge pink guy. You know, I have some pink in my yard. Don't think I don't, but I like the white, the lime green, and maybe a pink a little later. So when I chose my full sun hydrangea, I went for a little lime. It could be Bobo. I just showed you that one a minute ago. Those PGs, those will last a little longer white and take all the sun you have before I start to turn color maybe a little later in summer and fall. So if you were asking me my favorite, it would probably be those smaller PGs like Bobo, Little Lime, and also Oak Leaf, to be honest with you. I'm looking for something for all seasons. I love foliage. Yes, I love flowers. To me, flowers always kind of come and go, but if I've got an attractive plant that I like the foliage on, that Oak Leaf offers the fall color, the peely bark, nice white flower in the summer. You know, you got the same idea, but maybe a little more interesting in the fall and the winter.
Trev, got a couple questions here about soil acidity and alkalinity. First one is concerning the stump remover. Yep. If once a year is enough, or how often should they do?
Well, like I mentioned real quick when I was showing them, if it was me, I would always do it at least once a year in March, and again probably in early summer. Okay, so twice a year. I would play. This is something to play with as a gardener. You do it in March. Maybe try it once, see what happens. If you do it twice, I think you'll keep it more consistent, because all this is water soluble. It's going to flush through the soil. It's not a permanent solution for acidity or alkalinity. But if I add that down there at least twice a year, I think you'll keep your color consistent. It's not one of these things you got to go out and do every 6 weeks, you know, kind of thing. Because again, it's not fertilizer. A lot of people think they buy that. That's their food. It's everything they need. That's strictly something to change my pH in my soil. Then I go grab the rhodie food, the rose and flower food, Ultra Bloom, or a good organic fertilizer to keep them going.
Next one is more the change in acid. Had a couple questions concerning adding coffee grounds or lemon or orange peels to the soil.
Okay. Sorry, Ben, you're cutting out on the net there for a second, but I think you said coffee grounds and some different acidic things like that.
Adding coffee grounds or lemon or orange peels to turn the soil more acid.
So again, my grandmother did it. My mom still does it. I mean, it's not the end of the world. It's not going to change your pH as much as you think. I don't have a problem with you throwing them out there. It will certainly help, but you're never going to adjust the pH that much just with something out of the food waste or the compost. So certainly do it, but I would still get the pH adjuster to make it the color you like. Uh-oh, you are frozen.
No, am I unfrozen?
There you
go. We've got a couple questions here as far as people who have inherited hydrangeas in the house they bought and they don't know whether it's going to bloom on old or new wood. Yep. Is there an easy way to figure that out?
Yep, that's a great question, because it's always one we end up usually getting at some point. If you got a house and you bought a hydrangea and you don't have any idea, I mean, I'll be honest, this is probably a 20-year thing. You know, the first Endless Summer came out right about 2000, and that's when the new generation of hydrangeas kind of took off with everybody. If, you know, again, you're not going to be able to find out when was it planted, what is it. It's never going to hurt the plant to cut it back. So to me, the only way you're going to find out is bite the bullet in the spring one year and say, that's enough. Let's get you pruned down. And if it grows up and blooms immediately after a hard prune, you know you've got a new generation hydrangea. Vice versa, if you prune that down, it comes up with healthy leaves. It won't hurt the plant, but you're like, wow, I got very little flower, or I skipped a year, then you would know you have old wood only.
Very good, Trev. Another one kind of pruning here. Find it. This person does have one that bloomed on old wood, and they're wondering how far back they can prune. The plant's about 6 feet tall.
Yeah, so again, you can go down. I should have, if I had a big old hydrangea branch here, I could show you, but I got my flower. Hydrangea always has pairs of buds right down the stem, all the way down into the base. So I'm always going to prune above one of those pairs of buds to deadhead it. And then I get 2 shoots come right back out. And essentially I would have double the flower on the next season when it blooms again. You're always safe to go down a bud or 2 if it's old wood bloom, and that's it. If I go farther than that, that's when I probably take a chance again. I'm not going to get as much flowering just for that one season, and then it kicks right back in. It's never going to hurt the plant.
Next one's back to the stump remover. Should they water that in right after applying it?
Yep, always. I want to get that down. You know, it's the same thing with me with fertilizer. If I have my garden mulch, I have compost on everything, 2-3 inches deep. I will take that compost and just kind of lightly pull it away from the base, put my food down, add my acidic amendment, alkaline amendment, whatever it is. Then I'll remulch that hydrangea, or if you haven't mulched, put it down and get some compost to mulch over it. And then we water the daylights out of that thing, and that gets it right down into the soil, the fertilizer, and the pH adjuster as well.
Do you know of any, have you ever seen an orange hydrangea?
I have never seen an orange one. You can always go, you know, again, pastel, pinky, reddy, or the other extremes, the lavender, blue, purple. I've never seen an orangey one. If they did, somebody probably cheated with some spray paint, floral paint, something, and changed their color. I'd like an orange one if there is one out there. Maybe I'll start working on one, right?
Trev, got a couple questions here. People asking for suggestions for growing a hydrangea in a container.
Yep. Another great question. You know, hydrangeas, especially the newer stuff that doesn't get as big, very easy to grow in pots. My issue with container growing is a lot of root systems. So don't think I can get a little pot and pop a hydrangea and it's going to be happy for very long. A nice size container, and it probably needs to be repotted on occasion to keep it happy. I need soil to hold moisture to keep my hydrangea happy in the warm summers. This is a great question to me because it goes back, excuse me, to the soil pH. You know, let's say I want to get a summer crush, makes a great container hydrangea. I know a lot of folks that do use that one. So let's say I pop that into potting soil in a nice sized container. I'm going to have the pinky, reddy, raspberry color, and I won't turn blue or purple. If I want to acidify that, then we're going to buy an acidic type potting soil, like we carry a rhododendron, azalea, blueberry, all those fabulous acidic plants. We would have a separate potting soil that's got the acidity built in. Now I put summer crush in that soil in a container. Now I'm going to turn blue or purple without having to do any extra work.
Trev, got a couple in here for watering practices during the heat of summer for clay-based soils.
For clay-based?
Yeah, for clay.
Clay. Okay. You know, I would never change my watering. I mean, if you got sandy soil, yeah, you're probably going to have to water a little more because it's going right through. I would always have, you know, for me, and I do the same thing in my yard, is I would always try to water a little bit less often for a longer time. I want to really saturate the soil down and get everything wet, encourage a deeper root system. Now, clay is a little bit tougher one. I don't know how far down your clay layer is. Hydrangeas is one that's honestly not going to care as much about being a little bit wetter. You're going to have to be careful with other plants sitting on hard pan clay. But hydrangeas specifically, I would try, you know, let's say I took a plant, you came down here today and went shopping, you know, popped a new one on the ground, followed all the instructions, got some food on it, mulched it. You know, you're probably going to be checking on that little guy, you know, probably every 2 or 3 days here, the rest of the summer, keeping it moist so that I've got a happy plant, more root system, and I'm good to go the next season. If you've got an old one or an existing yard where you've got them, it's going to be a little tougher for me to tell you because I don't know your soil. But let's just say you had a foot and a half of good loamy soil, and then I've got a hard pan later underneath there, I might be out there once a week, really soaking it. Mine, I mentioned I bought a Hamptons. I redid one of my little shade gardens, and I don't get a lot of light until like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I get a little bit of late day sun in this new garden I made. I've been running my sprinkler, my little oscillator, and soaking that garden about once a week here, even with the 112-degree heat. And I haven't had any burn on that one. I've had a couple other plants like everybody that got torched, but he's been happy with about once a week. And again, a longer time. So hopefully, again, I'm encouraging a deeper root system and a happier plant long term.
Very good, Trev. We've got one here. Customer has a couple of hydrangeas that are looking a little scraggly. Is there anything that you can help them fill out?
Well, I think some fertilizer is probably going to help. I would absolutely feed them and then compost or mulch around them. Keep them watered. I think this is probably going to be a pruning thing that we can probably help correct going into 2022. If you had a lot of bare area and a little floppy stem, I think some food, some mulch will encourage some fresh growth off the root system and probably help fill it in. But this winter, I would really look at that thing towards the beginning of March. Nick wood if you have to. Get all the dead wood cut out of there. Feed it. Mulch it again. And I think you're going to see a lot of fresh growth start to come out. And I think it'll look a lot better.
Trev, got another one here for you. Back to trying to change the color of the hydrangeas. How quickly does that typically happen?
Oh, it'll be in a few weeks. I mean, if I like I said, if I took home Summer Crush here that's got raspberry pinky red flowers on it right now, I would say within a month you're going to start seeing the color change a little bit, and then the new buds that are coming up are going to start to be towards that lavender, blue, purple side pretty immediately.
Question about a climbing hydrangea. Is there varieties that don't bloom? This individual has had one for over 6 years and hasn't had any flowers on it.
Well, if you started with the start, I don't think it's let's try it 2 ways. I mean, those have got to get some age to them. You're not going to see, a little gallon plant of climbing hydrangea typically bloom. I know mine, I probably had it in the ground. It grew great. I got foliage. Everything was fine. But I was probably 4 or 5 years before I started to get a heavy flower set of those lace cap flowers on my own. I would say that could be one reason. The other is pruning. That is an old wood blooming plant. So if you're walking out in the winter and you're cutting it back at all or doing any shearing on it to keep it flat, you may be cutting off a little bit of that old wood that would have produced that flower. The person who asked would probably know better, but if you were out pruning this winter, maybe just look to tidy it, thin it out a little bit. Don't cut it back this year, and I bet you'll see some bud set and some flowering come 2022. The climbers will always bloom out in that, kind of May, June time frame. I know mine just finished on my variegated one, but again, it might be just age. Usually that's a plant that we have to get a few years in the ground before we get regular flowering.
Trevor, back to that question about the scraggly hydrangea. You mentioned nicking the wood.
Yeah.
Could you help explain that a little bit for him?
Well, so if I've got, I don't know if you can see my arm, but let's borrow this tree if I pull it over here. So let's pretend this doesn't have any leaves on it or pretty flowers like it does right now. We're in the dead of winter. I've just got the twigs. I mean, this is a deciduous plant. So if I take my fingernail, my pruners, and I literally just nick the bark, I'm always going to see, whether it's now, January, June, I don't care what month, I'm always going to see a bright green cambium, the healthy tissue underneath there. So if I do the same thing to mine every winter. It's not a disease or a problem if you lose some wood on any plant, or including hydrangea. But if I'm wondering in the winter, I don't have leaves, what's alive, what's dead, sometimes you can touch it and it doesn't feel pliable. It'll crack and pull right out of there. If you want to check, just take your fingernail or your pruners and just nick the bark a little bit. Oh, that's got no green in it. Let's just cut it out at the base, get it out of the way so that I encourage some fresh stems to come out.
Trevor, we've got one here about moving a hydrangea, moving spots
Yep.
and transplanting it.
Yep. Yeah, transplant, you know, whether you were asking me at the Rhodey class or the perennial class in 2 weeks or any class period, we really only want to move plants when they're dormant. And I would put hydrangea at the top of the list for that. If you can possibly wait, you know, this would be like a Thanksgiving, Christmas, holidays up till early March. I can dig up, divide, move hydrangeas, do whatever I want during the dormant season and have near 100% success. If you dug one up right now, you're probably asking a pretty good chance of losing that plant. Now, if this person's asking because the deck's getting built this summer, I've got a construction project happening, I have got to move this thing or the backhoe is going to run it over, which, you know, happens to some of us. I got to do something with it. Okay, let's come down here and get some root and grow, a good liquid food that I can encourage some fresh root systems. Let's get a new hole dug or get a big pot and get it dug and planted really quickly. Add that rooting hormone on there to help it recover a little bit. It's probably going to lose some flowers. It'll probably lose some leaves, but I don't know that you could probably keep it from losing the plant, but I'm really going to keep that wet here after I dig it up. You know, if it's in the ground for 2, 3, 4 years, yeah, probably very doable. If you're talking about a plant that you bought the house and it's been in there who knows how many decades, that's going to be a massive amount of roots to move. And I would really try to wait and do that or attempt that here when I'm dormant in the winter.
A couple more here, Trev. I think you covered this, but just if we cover it again real quick, as far as deadheading, how far down do you want to cut?
Yep. Well, again, you know, depending on your old wood, new wood bloom, the lady asked me a little bit ago about how far down can I cut it. If I have an old wood hydrangea, I'm only going to go down. I can skip one set of pair of buds and go to the next one. I'm okay with that. If I go farther than that, it'll always grow. It's not going to hurt the plant, but I may sacrifice some bloom. If I have a new wood or new generation hydrangea, go down as far as you want. You know, I can pick any pair of buds all the way down the stem into the base of the plant, and I'll just keep it shorter and I'll still get the flower that comes out on the stem.
The person here has an original endless summer hydrangea that they've had in a container. It needs to be repotted. Is that something they can do now, or should they wait till the winter?
Yeah. If we're going container to ground or container to container, I have no issue with you doing that anytime. Again, really watch the water here as you move it, and do it hopefully on a day that's maybe a little bit cooler, like today. It's overcast. I'd water the daylights out of it in the pot that it's in, pull it out of there. It's probably got a lot of surface roots, so grab where's my pruners? You know, I typically will take my pruner blade and score the outside of that root ball, hoary knife, anything sharp. We're not going to dig in and rip it apart, but I want to loosen the outside of that, maybe even cut off the bottom inch if it's a big thick mat of roots. Then we get some good potting soil, fill our new container, pop it in there, and off we go.
Right on, Trev. I think we'll wrap up the Q&A there. You guys can always send us an email if we didn't get to your question, and I'll pass it back to Trev here for the last couple minutes.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. This is always a fun class. Go out and enjoy your hydrangeas this summer. Hopefully, we'll see you down here at the nursery. Like I said, we've got a great selection right now, and being 20% off, a great week to come down and shop and get some fresh specimens for the landscape. Hopefully, we will see you tomorrow for the shade class at 11. I'll be in here at 11 o'clock for Pacific Northwest shade plants. Enjoy the day, everybody. Get out there and work in the yard. We'll see you soon.